Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, the final part of our season preview series. How can the big three fit better? Probably the biggest question of all. We saved it for the end. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Suns. I am Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Thursday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button and do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer. Get Locked On to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode, guys, brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel by placing your first $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Joining me, as always, the executive producer of The Drive on Fox Sports 910 from the wonderful West Valley. How are we feeling on this Thursday? Ben Garcia.
So I'm over here. I was looking at my phone just a second ago. I wanted to see when the first preseason game is. Not for the Suns. We know that that's Sunday. We'll get to that. But I just am itching to watch some sort of basketball. And I'll be honest with you, since Caitlin Clark got knocked out, not really scratching the itch for me. We got preseason basketball on Friday. Also, am I casual if I didn't know that they're playing games in Dubai in the preseason?
I don't know if it makes you casual. I think they've been doing it the past few years.
And
then they do Paris in the regular season, and then they do Mexico City.
Season.
Yeah.
And Mexico, they've always done it. The Suns played one.
Probably just because the Middle East is too far to get to in the middle of the regular season. Whereas if you start it in the preseason, then they have all the time in the world to get out there. I would guess.
And Paris is close, so I agree.
A lot closer. I mean, if you're in New York, Paris is only a 7-hour flight. The Middle East is what? I mean, I don't even know. 15 hours?
Who we sending to Paris this year? If it's not Victor Wembanyama, Rudy Gobert game, I don't know what it is.
Last year it was the most bizarre. It was Hawks Pacers or something. But okay.
We're close. Sunday.
We're close. We'll probably talk about what we're looking forward to on Friday's show here from a Sun standpoint in that Lakers game. But one final question to answer here in our season preview series, Ben. Getting to number 13. Shout out to Steve Nash here. How do the big three fit better? And I mean, look, we've done 13 of these, like I just said. We've talked around and through and about this in different ways already. But one thing you've harped on a ton as we've been talking about this is, I think the stagnancy of Kevin Durant. I mean, that's where I think maybe this conversation kind of has to start, is that once this team got healthy, it felt like he went from having to do everything to not doing enough because he wasn't put in position to. How do you fix that problem?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's at times with Frank Vogel, he never felt like he was drawing up plays for Kevin Durant to get open. He felt like it was just really very close to the Steve Nash Brooklyn Nets thing, where it was just basically like, hey, just go be awesome, which is fine, but it doesn't work on a day-to-day basis just trying to keep Kevin Durant involved. I think the biggest thing is sometimes I hope we see more this year of Kevin Durant just running with the bench unit at times. It's all going to make sense of staggering, right? I thought last year when Vogel, Beal, and Booker, when Vogel, Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant were all together, I felt like the staggering of that wasn't very good. Oftentimes it was just Bradley Beal or Devin Booker with the bench. I would love to see Kevin Durant be the main focal point in the offense at least once or twice in a game, just running with the second unit for a little bit. And I feel like that will allow him to be in his natural role where he's not sharing the ball with anyone. Kevin Durant can create his own shot. He can get to the rim. And I think a lot of that as well. I mentioned this. Kevin Durant didn't seem like he can, but it didn't seem like he was getting to the rim as much as he was in previous years. Then he'd said Dwayne Rankin, kind of avoiding all that contact. I kind of want to see Kevin Durant do a little bit like what Bradley Beal would do and get to the rim a little bit more. I don't really expect that from Devin Booker, But I would like to see Kevin Durant live around the rim just a little bit more. Do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. I personally feel like that ship has sailed. And if he is physically telling us that that is a kind of a choice rather than just taking what's being given, the numbers have borne that out. I think I've taken the mea culpa a lot of times that after the first couple games last year, I did a whole series of rants about this and had egg on my face. I mean, he can make it work without, and I think he's proven that. But I think the idea that he's going to go back to taking more contact and doing something more physically taxing as he ages is probably unrealistic. But I do agree with you that look, it's funny that you use the example of Steve Nash as a bad one. I don't think that he was by any means like running some kind of revolutionary offense, but I think that he was playing to his personnel, and those offenses were some of the most dominant in the history of the NBA. They got within a jump shot of the finals, and they probably would have beaten of the conference finals, and I think they would have beaten Atlanta, and I think they would have beaten the Suns, if I'm being honest. So to me, the version of Kevin Durant, whether you're talking about Steve Nash or Jacques Vaughn or whatever, the version we saw in Brooklyn, which was a lot of isolation in space and just letting him kind of cook, was one of the best versions of Kevin Durant that we've ever seen. So I don't really see an issue with that's how he wants to play. To me, I think a lot of this is going to come down to creating that space, however you need to do it. Can you play faster? Can you get Nurkic to take more threes? Can you put small ball lineups on the court? To me, that's what it's going to be, right? Because if you kind of combine the two threads that we've now talked about, him driving to the basket, I think obviously if there's one dude between him and the basket, he can probably do it. The problem becomes when teams are overloading on him and there's a rim protector and everything else. So I think if you're wanting him to get more involved, diversify how he's scoring, and you want to continue to play simply, the best way to combine those things is just to spread things out more and not have him in such a congested area. So, I mean, it's very basic, but again, we are just talking about taking this offense and what it looked like when all three of these guys were on the court from very good to great. And those little things are how you do it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned that before. That was something as well that I was kind of was going to harp on is this offense has got to be more spread out. Not for Kevin Durant. I don't think that that's as big of a deal, although he will benefit from it because Kevin Durant is a very good jump shooter. But I also think spreading it out a little bit will help Devin Booker a bit with his open three-point looks. For some reason, I don't have the stats in front of me. It just feels like the only threes that I want Devin Booker taking are in transition. When he's stepping into his three-point shot, feels like he has a much higher percentage of hitting it than when he's just staying stagnant. And oftentimes, everyone kind of forgets that Devin Booker's not as good as a three-point shooter than we sometimes think he is, former three-point champion. I just would like to see that as well, better for the Booker standpoint, because I think Booker plays best in space. I think he's the best shot creator on the team, and allowing him to have that's going to open up a bundle of things. But I also think with Kevin Durant, too often times teams, it was so easy to take Kevin Durant out of games because they were just, frankly, doubling the guy. They were doing the same thing with Devin Booker. We've got to do a much better job setting shots off of screens, especially with Kevin Durant. Not so much with Devin Booker unless it's an inbound play. But we have got to make shot. Kevin Durant makes it look easy, but oftentimes he was hitting very tough shots. There's got to be a way. And I think it's just really a lot of screen action and playing in transition. But we got to find more space for Kevin Durant and Devin Booker because those are the two guys that I'm worried about the most.
Yeah, look, I guess to me, Book is, I trust him on open catch and shoot threes. The numbers fluctuate. I kind of just we've watched the guy forever. I don't think he's a worse shooter than we think. I just think sometimes
worst three-point shooter is what I'm saying. That's all.
I get what you're saying. I mean, if there is last year I'm looking at the numbers. He was 33% on open threes. That is not good enough. But that's an anomaly. And I think even if it's stagnant, even if things get bogged down, if you're asking me, the ball moves the set is executed well, everybody's in a good rhythm, and he catches the ball with an open three, I mean, the guy's going to make that shot. I just, that doesn't necessarily worry me. I guess it's just more so, right? I guess this is where I want to go, and I kind of want to use Mike Budenholzer's past as a way to talk about this, and a comparison that I've made a few times as we've been talking through this of like, which of his stops is actually the most informative about where this is going, and I don't think it's Milwaukee. So let's get there next. First, today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Literally anything. You could throw a bet that you know is going to lose just to see how big of odds you can possibly find on this entire app and just see what happens. Looking at Major League Baseball, however, this will all have happened already, but you got Padres Braves, you got Brewers Mets. You can look forward to when the Phillies and the Yankees and the Dodgers are all getting involved come this weekend. Get in on that action. The WNBA playoffs continue to roll even if Ben tuned out, and so much more, including some NBA futures. Look, it's all happening. Fall is the best time for sports. Check it all out with that $5 bet and those $200 in bonus bets coming your way, all at FanDuel.com. All right, let's keep it rolling. I want to remind everybody to check out the Locked On NBA podcast. They're getting you ready for the season as well, and we have some fun wrinkles coming your way on that feed at a national level. Ben, be honest. Did you watch the 2 Caitlin Clark playoff games either?
Yes, sure did. Okay. I watched them both while working out. Our apartment here has a gym, and so when I know there's going to be a game on that I watch, and I hate lifting, even though I do it, I hate it, I at least want to be distracted while I'm doing it. So yes, I watched both Caitlin Clark games. I watched the Reno Aces game 2. I think it was against the Storm. So I watched that game, and I haven't tuned in since. Oh, that's not true. I watched a little bit of Sabrina Ionescu against the Aces last night. A little bit. Other than that, yes.
I don't think the NBA preseason Abu Dhabi game is going to be happening while you're doing your workout. I think that'll be like 9 a.m. for
right?
us. Yeah, that's the.
Well, I wasn't going to watch that game. There's a few other games as well going on. We have the New Zealand Breakers versus the Jazz.
Oh, we're doing that again too. The
Wolves
games.
Lakers is the only game that anyone would have any interest in, and that's only on NBA TV. And if you're poor like me, you don't have that channel, so you're gonna have to illegally stream it.
Which we would never do, of course. We would never encourage.
No, I would never do that. Never do such thing.
Okay, Ben. So net rating last year when these 3 guys were on the court, just to kind of reset the conversation. Durant, Beal, Booker on 123.6 offensive rating. We'll just forget the defense. It's not really what we're talking about here. And we've said multiple times, it's just not quite good enough. This is a team that should aspire to be the number 1 offense in the league. That should be the goal. If you fall short, maybe you land at 3rd, you're still feeling pretty good about yourself. When I think about what Bud will do here, we talked a little bit about just maximizing the individual players, what's kind of their optimal groove and style right now. I think that the best thing that I think he will do is utilizing these 3 guys in actions together to get them the kind of looks that they want. And I think it's funny to say that simplifying is going to go a long way, but I truly think that that's going to kind of be the name of the game here for Mike Budenholzer, is just letting these guys cook and trying to have them interact with each other on the court more. And I think that in Atlanta, more so than even in Milwaukee, you saw the ingredients of how that can happen with some of the IQ, selflessness, and ball movement that we were talking about yesterday that I think can be this team's identity. I can't look at what Giannis was and feel like that's going to be replicated here. I think that what the Hawks did is much more of what we should be looking at, and how can these guys kind of fit into those roles of guys like Korver and Millsap and Horford and everybody else.
So what do you mean by that? Do you mean it was more of a collaborative effort, whereas a lot of the offense was just predicated on those Giannis teams around Giannis? Whereas that Atlanta Hawks team, Jeff Teague was on that team, Paul Millsap was on that team, Kyle Korver was on that team. It was kind of a slew and hodgepodge of mediocre all the way up to one all-star level player in Paul Millsap, but not a perennial all-star. Are you asking for more of a... And who?
Horford.
Horford was there as well. Man, that guy's been in the league. That guy's old as dirt, Brendon. Oh my goodness. And he's still contributing. But he was on that team as well. Is it just more of a collaborative effort for you?
Yeah, it's a few things. Look, I think that what Teague did, I think, is the starting point, right? I think that it's illustrative to kind of think of like what Jeff Teague was as a point guard, as really like a caretaker and an orchestrator of the offense, more than somebody that is like dribbling the air out of the ball and like a Chris Paul style of point guard, right? I think that you'll see Tyus Jones throw an entry pass or give it up to the second side and just go space in the corner on a lot of possessions, right? I mean, I think that in the half court, it's going to be a lot of that. I think that I look at what Kyle Korver was for that team, where so much of what that team did to kind of just bend the defense and get the opposing team into rotations and really just get the energy going in a possession was with Kyle Korver sprinting around off the ball like a lunatic. And I think Bradley Beal, I think him and Booker both are really going to be thrown into that. Obviously, Nurkic as a hub of a big passer, you could easily see kind of what Millsap and Horford did. I mean, Durant is a unicorn. That I'm not going to sit here and tell you DeMar Carroll is anything close to what Kevin Durant was, right? Like nothing is
the original
one-to-one.
Jay Crowder.
Yeah, basically, nothing's 1-to-1 here. But I think in particular, it's Tyus in that Teague role, and then what Booker and Beal can maybe be doing some of what Korver did. I think those are the parts in the half court specifically that intrigue me to really get all of those three guys I just mentioned in the backcourt going at an even higher level than they did last year.
I believe Bradley Beal is still going to play a decent amount of point guard this year. And you bring up a really good point with Jeff Teague, and I went to go fact check myself to make sure I wasn't mistaken. The only reason I know who Jeff Teague is because of Coach Budenholzer. When Jeff Teague went from not the Pacers, but then the Timberwolves, because I just forgot he played on the Pacers. When the Timberwolves got him years ago, I was like, wait a second, they got Jeff Teague? And little did I really realize that Budenholzer kind of made Jeff Teague. It wasn't the other way around. So if Budenholzer can raise the floor of guys like Tyus Jones, who we're not necessarily talking about right now, but even more so, I think Bradley Beal benefits the most from that. Because Bradley Beal and Jeff Teague, I don't think they're that different of players, especially in their primes. Both guys played fast. Both guys would chuck up a three. Bradley Beal's definitely a better three-point shooter, and both guys kind of got to the basket. It's a very interesting point that you had mentioned with him. And then it does kind of leave you into the Devin Booker route. Now, I see Devin Booker, it's hard because when you put it in that perspective, it's just so hard for me to say Devin Booker in the same Jeff Teague role. But I just do expect both. It's why I don't think Tyus Jones is just here just to play traditional point guard, bring the ball up the floor every single time. I think just having Tyus Jones on the court is going to help be a little bit quarterbackial, if that's even a word. It's not. But I don't think it's just him taking up the court. I think it's him being surgical and being able to diagnose defenses. That's what point guards do as well. So I do believe, like what you're saying, I think it's just going to supercharge Bradley Beal, which I'm hoping Budenholzer can unlock. And just kind of building off that point, I need Bradley Beal to go back to being the combo guard that he was with the Wizards. And that's why I say, I still think he's going to play a little bit of point guard. Mm-hmm. But I need him to go back to playing fast, get to the basket, play downhill, fast, and be able to bring the ball up the court as well. So the Jeff Teague Atlanta Hawks thing is very interesting because when you were saying the Bucks, I was like, oh, he's going to go with the Hawks here. And that also just leads me to believe that the floor and this is where I was really going with this, is the floor of the big three needs to get raised. Like last year, I felt like it was too low. And when you go to that Atlanta Hawks team, what did Budenholzer do? They weren't very good in the playoffs, but he raised the floor of that whole team. I need the floor of this team to be at what they were last year as an offensive rating. I think it was like 8th or 7th, and raise that up to be a team that's in the top 4. And I think that's the only thing acceptable. So that Atlanta Hawks thing is really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it like that.
Yeah, Teague and Korver both. I think those are the guys to zero in on. I think that, Bud didn't really have a toy like that in Milwaukee like he did with Korver. Grayson did it a little bit, and he probably will here. But that's just an easy way to kind of maximize when you have shooters like Beal and Booker to use them without them having to have the ball in their hands, right? I mean, we even heard Grayson talk about on media day the idea of being a screener more and even getting the ball on the roll, which is something that that wasn't even happening in the NBA when Bud was in Atlanta, but it's another, I guess, evolution of how to use shooters beyond just having them stand there. And I think if you're talking about maximizing Beal, Booker, and Durant, and there's only one ball, and who's the top guy, and who's the point guard, and all the conversations we wound ourselves up about last year, I just think one of the best things that you can do is have them bend the defense without having to dominate the ball. And I think both guys will do it. And, Durant will probably benefit. But let's talk about what the goals might be. Let's talk about that top offense kind of mark.
Yes.
Let's talk about all of it. How will this all actually affect the Suns' overall success this season? Coming up next. And we're back. Let's wrap up the show. Do the Suns have the best offensive talent in the NBA, Ben? If you mentioned raising the floor, we're talking about how to maximize some of the low-hanging fruit, some of the schematic stuff, some of the personnel-based things. If they fix a lot of that, do they have the goods? Is it reasonable that they could be the best offense in the NBA, or are we kidding ourselves by thinking that?
It is so no, you are not kidding yourself. It is incredibly reasonable that a team with Kevin Durant, who has not slowed down, and if he has, it's by like this much, which is still 95% of Kevin Durant. Devin Booker is in his prime. I mentioned this yesterday. People treat the Suns like they're an old team. I think Bradley Beal's like 30, maybe 31, which would be a player's prime in the NBA. But also, Devin Booker is young. The only person old on this team is Kevin Durant. So, yes, 1,000% they can be the best offense in the NBA. If you're asking me who is, it's so frustrating because I have such a annoyance with this team, but it really is Boston. With those 5 guys, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, that's 6 guys, but still, like, that's the best 6-man rotation in the league. Like, it used to be the Nuggets. I would say just behind the Celtics. Yes. And then, of course, the floor, I think Budenholzer raises them up to be something that I didn't think Frank Vogel could ever do, being the best offense in the league. Do you think they will be, though? Where do you think they'll land this year? That's what I want to know. I'm into predictions. Like, do you think they're going to be better?
Right? Like, there's an 82-game player and there's a 16-game player. He has said that, the difference between the regular season and the playoffs. And I think that it's true. I mean, you're laughing. I think that's very true. And I think that
it's 1,000% true because we were just talking about the Hawks. That was an 82-game team. It wasn't a 16-game team. So,
and in the NBA right now, I think on the offensive end, that's even more stark than ever, right? Like, the top offenses in the regular season last year, in the top 10, the Suns were 9th, as we've said. Rounding out, you had teams like the Clippers, teams like the Pacers, teams like the Bucks, teams like the Warriors.
Fast.
And yeah, if you can juice tempo and you can make threes and you can spread the floor and maybe even hit the offensive glass a little bit, that's a recipe for being a very dominant offensive team. So I think that the floor needs to get higher. They need to be higher than ninth. But what makes me feel so confident about the Suns offense is exactly what it always has been, which is that the ceiling has the potential to be one of the highest, which means that their big three at the end of these games and when you really need a bucket are going to be able to manufacture it, ideally, better than almost any other team. And I still believe that, and I think that they will in the regular season be higher than ninth, but I also think that the ceiling, which you will see in some of these fourth quarters, and hopefully you will see come playoff time, will also be better because of a lot of the things we've been talking about to put this team in a better position to score the ball through their best players. Look, a question to me, though, has always been, because you mentioned some of the teams, the players at the center of those teams are the reason why. You're talking about Luka, you're talking about Jokic, you're talking about maybe even Giannis. Those players are the reason not only that those teams are so great on offense, but also that those teams have eliminated the Suns 3 out of the past 4 years. For the Suns' big three to be maximized and for it to really show up on the court and matter and get them where they want to go, the sum has to be better than the parts, right? Like, they have to be better than any one of them are, and they have to be better than those guys. Do you think that's reasonable? Can the Suns' big three get good enough where they look at Luka and they say, yeah, maybe Book, maybe KD aren't quite as good as you, but the three of our guys collectively are going to be able to outpower you. That's really what it has to be.
If Budenholzer can make them all work, the Suns are the best six-man like in the league. I think Tyus Jones, Grayson Allen, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Yusuf Nurkic, Royce O'Neal, whatever it is, right? Bradley Beal. I think that 6 or 7 is the best in the NBA if Budenholzer can get it to work correctly. And there's a glaring hole there. Just because the talent's there doesn't mean it's always going to work. And they're missing some holes at the wing, and they're kind of small. What I would tell you is this. After you and I, 27 minutes so far of us talking about the Suns, how the big three can fit better, Budenholzer, the Hawks, ninth not only was not good enough for this team, but when I read you off that talent, Brendon, that's kind of embarrassing. Like, I understand that they were injured last year and they didn't have a lot of chemistry. But the bottom line for this team, they have to be a top 5 offense. They have to be. If they're not a top 5 offense, they're not going to sniff a championship unless, of course, for some reason, they are just now a defensive-minded team and they're shutting teams down, which I highly don't think that's going to happen. Don't you think it's kind of awful that that's even close to it?
Well, I think that's why fans were pulling their hair out about a lot of the easy stuff all year. Throwing the ball all around the gym, fourth quarter collapses, not really maximizing the personnel, threes. I mean, that's why like all that stuff sounds so tiny, and we've just been repeating it over and over and over all summer long, but it's because a lot of that is the difference between ninth and closer to top 3 or top 5. Then you're talking about the ceiling, and that's where I think the big three come in, and this conversation can get them from top 3 to top 5 to the best, and then obviously in the postseason, eclipsing even that and winning tight games and big moments like you need to in April, May, and June. I think the best offenses in the NBA are still in Dallas and Denver. I don't necessarily agree with your...
Denver? Really?
If
Denver?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But there's no more KCP.
When Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are on the court together, assuming that... Bruce Brown didn't do anything for their offense. I mean, we're talking offense.
No, but 2 years ago, he was absolutely a spark off the bench, especially in the playoffs. Now, I agree with you. 3 quarters through the regular season, Nuggets fans wanted Bruce Brown shipped off to Guantanamo Bay.
We're not debating if Bruce Brown's a good player. Of course, he was great. He'd punch me in the face if I'm telling him he's not good and he smacked my team out of the playoffs, right?
I'll punch him back if he touches you.
But he wasn't helping their offense.
Okay.
He was a defensive player, and he could play a little bit of backup point guard, and he could handle the ball, which was nice because they didn't want to play, Like, what did they have? Ish Smith back then, but he was not helping their offense. Losing KCP's shooting is big for Denver, so I'll hear you on that.
Big, huge.
But look, if Murray can even be, the past couple of years have not been anything awesome for Jamal Murray, and even then, when him and Nikola Jokic are on the court, you're talking about nothing in the history of basketball can even hold a flame to what those guys are when they're on the court together. You added Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon and everything. It's still, to me, until proven otherwise, that is a better offensive unit than the Phoenix Suns have. And Dallas, look, it's hit or miss, right? Because they made a bet on going further into offense this year because they felt that they needed to after their three-point shooting luck from guys like Jones and Washington and that group wasn't as reliable come playoff time. So they go get a Klay Thompson and they let Derek Jones go. And, they let Josh Green go, who was not a great offensive player and that sort of thing. Can they put an offensive unit on the court that actually can survive? Can Klay really be a playoff closer for a championship team anymore? Like, we'll see. But I think that Dallas can put a 5-man group with Kyrie, Luka, Klay, Lively, and put your fifth guy in there wherever you want. Those two still, to me, are better. And we haven't even talked about Oklahoma City, who might have the best shot creator single for himself player right now in the whole league in Shea. So those three are at least even with the Suns, if not ahead above them, in my opinion.
I get what you're saying. I do think the Nuggets are going to take a step back this year. Actually, the real X factor in that is how good is Christian Brown going to be? How good is he going to be able to step up in his third season and they must feel kind of confident in it because KCP's gone. I really do think Bruce Brown was especially spark off the bench offensively in the playoffs only. Getting to the rim and things like that. But Dallas, I get. I'm not going to fight you on. But I do believe that Dallas Mavericks team is lacking a little bit of athleticism and not the wow factor. Like, I like PJ Washington. I like Derek Lively, both super athletic, freakish dudes. Klay Thompson's not really there anymore. I really think defensively that's going to be an issue. And it felt like in a lot of big moments, Klay Thompson did shoot himself out of some games. Granted, shot like 40% from three, so that's not really fair. And then Luka Doncic as well, man. A guy that is so ball-dependent, ball-dominant for the offense to work. I also do think if you can take him out of a game, which teams like Boston were able to, like, just help neutralize the fact when he has the ball in his hands. It does make things not flow as smoothly. And so I get the Mavericks. I'm not going to fight you on that one. Boston, I do think, though, is maybe it's because they play so complimentary from their defense to their offense.
To
and
me,
they play
it's
fast.
like with Boston, the thing is that they're a team where the Suns don't actually have a disadvantage in terms of their number one. I think Booker and Durant are at least as good as Tatum.
No, not at least. Say it. Say it.
I mean, I've made the case that they're better than Tatum plenty of times.
They are better than Tatum. They are absolutely.
Then why are you sitting here saying the Celtics are so great?
When they are great. But I get frustrated when people try to compare Jason Tatum to Devin Booker. I'm willing to argue that those two are a wash at this point. But there's no way that their best player is 10 times better than our best player. And I'd still take Kevin Durant, but he's
definitely not 10 times better than anybody. But look,
it's frustrating, the Jason Tatum thing.
It is. I've done plenty of segments on it. You and I are firmly in the same camp. The point that I'm trying to drill home, though, is the only teams that scare me that could, even in a series, if I'm looking ahead to the spring and very little defense is played. We're looking at slugfest after slugfest, games in the 120s, which is probably how the Suns are going to need to win. The only teams that scare me, even if the Suns can max out what they have, the teams that still scare me are the ones that have that one guy who is better than anybody else on the court. And that problem they have never solved. That is the problem that has knocked them out every single time, even when we thought they had the advantage going in. And they have to figure out how to surpass that. Otherwise, we're going to be having that same conversation in the spring.
So that is true when it comes to Anthony Edwards, but I do think a little bit of Anthony Edwards a little luck.
I don't include him. That's why I keep saying 3 of the past 4 years and all that. I don't think last year that was the case.
Yeah, I think that was a little flukish. But to be fair to the Suns, no one has really solved the Luka Doncic problem. Like literally no one outside
I'm not
of
talking about defending him. I'm talking about if you're talking about a game
them.
where they just have to outscore him,
well, then I would agree with you. Then I would agree. Well, that's not true. I think it's just Dallas. I think the loss of KCP was massive. Now, I don't think the Suns couldn't beat Dallas. In fact,
yeah,
if the Suns, I do think the Suns can beat Dallas. And I think if they played in a series, I think they could do it. And I wouldn't be surprised. It goes 6, it goes 7 games. I don't fear Denver. I don't fear Denver anymore. It's not just the issues that they have internally, which I do think play a role with Mike Malone and apparently the front office not seeing eye to eye. KCP's that's a big misstep. And Jamal Murray outside of the Lakers series was not very good. He wasn't very good.
And the Olympics were atrocious.
I mean, he was atrocious in the Olympics. He was not good against the Timberwolves. Like, you could argue he was the sole reason why they lost the Timberwolves series, because if they just got anything from him, I don't even think that's really a series.
Yeah, there's reasons to be concerned about the Nuggets for sure.
I do think it's the Mavericks that I would worry about, but I still think the Suns offensively, I do think with Budenholzer, they're going to be the best. Look at me. I'm the optimist this time. You're the pessimist. Get mad at him.
I told you if we did enough shows, we would flip roles a little bit there. Brendon's
taking the Suns to get swept by the Mavs and the Nuggets, and why even show up? And I'm over here just touting the drum and pounding the table.
All right, that'll wrap us up for the day. We will have one more show for you tomorrow. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Become an everyday or join thousands of Suns fans. Get on the bandwagon. I don't even regret telling you to just do what all the other people are doing. Do what the cool kids are doing. Listen and watch the Locked On Suns podcast. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Enjoy your Thursday. See you then.